Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're diving into something that sounds a little dry at first, maybe? Pricing.
Yeah, not usually a crowd pleaser.
Right. But trust me, this isn't your Econ 101 lecture. Not even close.
Definitely more exciting than that.
We're digging into pricing for societal impact. And let me tell you, this book is eye-opening.
It really makes you think differently about, everything you buy.
Imagine a world where the price of something actually helps make the world a better place.
Yeah.
Not just, make a company richer.
Yeah, it's a huge shift, really. For the longest time, the whole business world was basically companies' only responsibility, shareholders, maximize those profits, and everything else is secondary.
Oh, I know that mentality. Greed is good, all that.
Sure. Exactly. But what's interesting is a lot of companies are starting to realize that to be successful long term, they've got to have a positive impact on the world around them.
Makes sense. People are more aware than ever these days.
Right. And they're realizing that pricing can be this powerful tool that can have their profit and make a difference. It's not an either or anymore.
Okay, so how does that actually work? Give me a real world example.
Well, look at Coca-Cola. They've obviously gotten a ton of criticism over the years for their environmental impact, especially water usage, right?
Yeah, that's been a big one.
But they've also started some really innovative things. Their Replenishing Africa program, RAIN.
Rain, like replenishing water.
Exactly. They're investing in water infrastructure, sanitation projects all across Africa. Now, you could say it's just good PR.
Sure, there's always that.
But the point is, they're putting serious money behind this social cause that, long-term, is also good for their business.
So it's not just looking good, it's doing good in a way that makes business sense.
Precisely. And the book makes this great point. Profitable companies are actually in a much better position to make a difference, They actually have the resources for these big initiatives.
Yeah, if you're barely scraping by, it's going to be tough to prioritize anything beyond, keeping the lights on.
Exactly. And Chapter 2 goes into this idea of true cost, which is huge. We usually only see the upfront price, right? Not all the hidden costs.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
So, say you're buying a washing machine, right? You've got two options, the basic model, easy on the wallet, and then the fancy energy efficient one, a bit pricier. Most of us would probably go for the cheaper one, right?
Oh, 100%. I'm all about that bargain life.
Right. But what if I told you there's a way to actually calculate the true cost of each machine? Not just the price tag, but the environmental impact, even social impact of its entire life.
Okay, so with a washing machine, we're not just talking about this sticker price, but how much water it uses, the energy over its lifetime, all of that.
Exactly. That's what impact-rated accounting gets at. It's like when you compare the total cost of owning a car, not just the sticker price, but gas, repairs, everything.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So then that cheaper washing machine might not actually be the better deal in the long run.
Right. Especially if that energy-efficient one saves you money on your utility bills over time,
That's a really interesting way to look at it. It's we need to start thinking about the total cost of what we buy, not just the immediate price. But how do companies get people to actually change their behavior? We're all pretty attached to a good deal.
That's where the psychology of pricing comes in, which is fascinating. Chapter 4 gets into this. Companies are using behavioral economics now to nudge consumers towards those sustainable choices without sacrificing profit.
Okay, now we're talking. This is where it gets really interesting. So tell me, what's one of those sneaky psychological tricks they're using?
Well, one that I found really intriguing is this idea of shrinkflation.
Shrinkflation. What is that? Like when my clothes shrink in the dryer?
Kind of. But in this case, companies subtly reduce the size of a product while keeping the price the same.
Wait, I think I've experienced this. My favorite bag of chips definitely shrunk, but the price stayed the same.
There you go. Now, from a profit standpoint, it's a way to increase their margins without directly raising prices. But the book argues this can also be a way to promote sustainability, believe it or not.
Hold on. How does making things smaller make them better for the environment?
Think about it. Smaller packages mean less packaging material used overall, less waste, smaller environmental footprint. They use the example of Palmolive, the soup company.
Okay, I'm listening.
They made their natural soap bar 20% smaller, which, yeah, you could see as a sneaky price increase, but they were also really transparent about the environmental benefits. Less packaging, win-win for them and the eco-conscious consumer.
So it's all about that balance, sustainability and reasonable prices.
Yeah.
But it's not just up to the companies, right? What about the government? Don't they have a role in all this?
Oh, absolutely. Government policies can massively influence pricing and how consumers behave. Chapter 5 goes into all that.
So like taxes, subsidies, all of that.
Exactly. They've got a whole toolbox they can use to encourage or discourage certain behaviors.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Okay, so let's take solar panels. In California, strong government incentives, subsidies, solar adoption is booming. But then in Texas, where those are lacking, it's been way slower.
Oh, wow. So the government can either be like a driving force or a roadblock, depending on their policies.
Exactly. And it's not just promoting good stuff. They use taxes to discourage things they see as harmful too, right?
Yeah, like those sin taxes on cigarettes and alcohol.
Exactly. Make them pricier. Hopefully people buy less.
Hit them where it hurts, the wallet.
Yeah.
But the book also mentions downsides to those government interventions, right? Something about fossil fuel subsidies.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Globally, those subsidies are a huge problem.
Okay, break that down for me. Why are those subsidies so bad?
Basically, they artificially lower the price of fossil fuels, which discourages companies from investing in renewables, keeps us hooked on the dirty stuff.
So the government's essentially propping up an industry that's harming the planet. That seems counterproductive, to say the least.
It's a complex issue, no easy answers. But it does raise an important question. Could higher gas prices, while a pain in the short term, actually be better for the environment in the long run?
That is an interesting question. I mean, it would definitely force people to consider alternatives, right?
Exactly. And that brings us to the next piece of this puzzle. How can companies get consumers on board with making more sustainable choices?
Right, because it's not enough for companies to just make changes behind the scenes. They've got to bring the consumer along.
Absolutely. Chapter 6 really dives into this idea of consumer engagement, how companies can nudge people towards those greener behaviors.
How do they do that? Like, besides just slapping a green label on everything and hoping for the best?
Well, it's got to be more than just superficial marketing, for sure. They need to be transparent about what they're doing, educate consumers about true costs, and create incentives that make those sustainable choices more attractive.
Okay, like how? Give me a real-world example of that.
Okay, let's take reusable shopping bags. Instead of just selling them, companies can use pricing to actually encourage people to use them. Offer discounts for those who bring their own bags, or even charge a small fee for disposable bags.
Oh yeah, my grocery store does that. And I'll be honest, even that little charge makes me think twice.
Right. It's about creating these tiny little friction points that make us pause and think about our impact.
It's funny how those small nudges can really add up. The book also talks about loss aversion, right? Like, we're more motivated to avoid losing something than gaining something.
Exactly. It's this powerful psychological principle. For example, framing that small bag fee as a loss is often way more effective than offering a reward for bringing your own bag.
That's so interesting. We really hate losing, even if it's just a few cents.
Exactly. And they highlight this really interesting case study that shows this in action. The Al-Azhar Park in Cairo.
Okay, tell me about this park. What's so special?
Well, when it opened, there was a big debate. Should there be an entrance fee or should it be free for everyone?
Which sounds nice in theory, but...
But, as they point out in the book, there can be unintended consequences to that. Other parks in Cairo that were free ended up getting neglected, run down, basically became havens for crime and lost their appeal.
Wow, so making it free actually made it less accessible and enjoyable for everyone.
Exactly. But with Al-Azhar, they decided to charge a fee, which was controversial, but that's actually what helped ensure the park could sustain itself long term.
Interesting. So the fees helped maintain it, provide security, make it a better experience overall.
Exactly. Plus, they offered discounts for locals, so it was still accessible.
That's awesome. So sometimes a well-designed pricing strategy, even if it seems counterintuitive, can actually make things more accessible and affordable in the long run.
Absolutely. And that leads us to another key part of this whole pricing for societal impact thing. Collaboration.
Collaboration, what do you mean?
Well, it's one thing if one company is doing this, but to really shift the market towards sustainability, they need to work together. That's when things get really interesting.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this collaborative approach. How does that actually work?
Well, Chapter 7 talks about this framework called the Sustainability Continuum. It helps companies figure out how committed they really are to sustainability and where they can improve.
So like a roadmap for them to become more sustainable.
Exactly. And one thing it highlights is that companies often struggle to actually act sustainably because they lack something.
Like what? What are they missing?
Could be motivation. Maybe they don't really see the business case for sustainability. Or maybe it's knowledge they don't know where to even start. Sometimes it's resources. They just don't have the money or people. And then there's affordability. Sustainable options are sometimes just more expensive.
Sounds like a lot of hurdles.
There are. But the good news is that a lot of these challenges are easier to deal with when companies work together. That's the beauty of collaboration. They can pool resources, share what they know, learn from each other's mistakes.
So less competition, more like collective action.
Exactly. And they have a great example of this. Unilever, the company that makes Dove soap, Ben & Jerry's, all that.
Oh yeah, I know them. What are they doing?
They have this program, Partner with Purpose, and they're actively collaborating with all their suppliers to create more sustainable products and packaging.
So it's not just Unilever saying, hey, you be more sustainable. They're actually working with their suppliers to make it happen.
Exactly. Sharing knowledge, investing in R&D together, being more supportive.
That's fantastic. It's a real partnership then. I love that they're putting their money where their mouth is and really trying to make their whole supply chain more sustainable.
And it's not just them. More and more companies are realizing these big challenges require everyone to pitch in. Instead of reinventing the wheel, they're starting to share their best practices and learn from each other.
So it sounds like collaboration is key here if we want to see real change.
Absolutely. And that actually leads perfectly into the next part of our conversation. What are some of the specific pricing strategies these companies are using to have a positive impact?
Okay, I'm hooked. Let's dive into those strategies. All right, so we've talked about the why behind this whole pricing for societal impact thing, this idea that companies can use pricing to actually do good while also, doing well for themselves. But let's get down to the nitty-gritty. What are some of the actual pricing strategies that these companies are using?
Well, the case study section of this book is like a buffet of really innovative approaches. We've got everything from unbundling and bundling to like changing prices based on how people behave to completely changing how they charge for things. It's wild.
Okay, unpack some of those for me. Let's start with unbundling. What is that?
Okay, so imagine this. You're buying a new phone. But instead of being stuck with a plan that has a zillion features you never use, you get to pick and choose data, minutes, texting, all priced separately.
Okay, so kind of like those build-your-own burrito places, but for your phone plan. I like it. Less waste, more control.
Exactly. It empowers the consumer and often leads to less waste, both for them and the company.
Makes sense. What about those behavior-based pricing things you mentioned? That sounds kind of Big Brother-ish, like, are they trying to manipulate me?
It can be used that way, for sure, but it can also be used to nudge people towards positive choices. Like, a simple example, giving discounts to customers who always pick the eco-friendly shipping option, or rewarding people who go paperless with their bills.
Okay, so like those loyalty programs where you get points for making the good choices. That's behavior-based pricing in action.
Exactly. It's about incentivizing the behavior you want to see more of. And then there's the whole changing how you charge for things. So instead of just selling a product outright, some companies are switching to subscriptions or offering pay-per-use.
Interesting. Is that like those clothing rental companies that are popping up everywhere?
Perfect example. Instead of buying a dress you wear once, you rent it. Or what about those electric scooters you see all over cities? You don't own it, you pay per minute.
So it's like access over ownership. That's a big shift.
Right, and potentially way more sustainable. It encourages companies to make stuff that lasts because their income depends on it.
Right, because if their product breaks after 2 uses, they're out of luck. So it pushes them to make higher quality stuff.
Right.
That's smart.
Exactly. And then there's this idea of launching new brands or even just new products at what they call a green premium.
Okay, now that one seems a little counterintuitive. Wouldn't that make those more sustainable products less accessible, because they're more expensive?
Yeah, it's a valid concern. But the thinking is by charging a little extra for something that's eco-friendly or socially responsible, they can actually cover the higher costs that often come with producing things more sustainably.
So like those customers who are willing to pay a little more are kind of helping to subsidize the transition to a greener future for everyone.
Exactly. And the book talks about this really fascinating case study, Georgia Pacific, the company that makes Brawny paper towels.
Brawny? Like with the Brawny Man on the package? What did they do?
So they were thinking about launching a 100% compostable paper towel, which awesome for sustainability, but they were really struggling with this question.
Yeah.
Do they charge more for it?
Yeah, I bet that's a tough call. You want to make your products better for the environment, but you also don't want to price people out.
Exactly. It's a balancing act for sure. Speaking of balancing acts, we were talking earlier about shrinkflation, how it can be kind of a sneaky way to boost profits. But isn't there like an ethical gray area there? Are companies being upfront about it or just hoping consumers won't notice?
That's what I was wondering too. Seems like it could go either way.
Totally. And that's where transparency is so crucial. If they're going to make a product smaller, they got to be open about it.
Like maybe actually change the packaging so it's not exactly the same as the old one.
Exactly. And be clear about why they're doing it. If it's to reduce waste, that's one thing. But if it's just being sneaky, not cool.
Yeah, consumers have a right to know what they're getting, especially if they're essentially paying more for less.
100%. It's about trust. And honestly, that's true for all these pricing strategies. Companies have got to be transparent about why and how they're doing things if they want people to trust them.
Transparency is key. But even if they're using these pricing strategies for good, isn't there a risk that it all just comes across as greenwashing? Like they're just trying to capitalize on people wanting to do good without actually changing anything.
It's a huge concern. And that's why it's not enough to just talk the talk. They got to walk the walk, you know? They have to back it up with action and be able to show the impact.
So it's not just what you say, it's what you do.
Exactly. And be willing to be held accountable for it.
Right, because at the end of the day, people can tell when you're being genuine and when you're just trying to pull a fast one.
100%. And if a company gets caught greenwashing, that can totally ruin their reputation.
Yeah, the stakes are high. But when it's done right, this pricing for societal impact stuff seems like it can be a really powerful force for good.
It really can. And it's not just on the companies either. We, as consumers, have a big role to play.
Oh, yeah. What can we do? How can we support this shift to more responsible pricing?
Well, we got to be informed consumers, right? Do our research, learn about the companies we're supporting and their practices.
So like read labels, check out their websites, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And be willing to put our money where our values are. If we want to see more of this, we got to support the businesses that are already doing it.
I like that. Put your money where your mouth is, basically.
Right. And honestly, don't underestimate the power of just speaking up. If you see a company doing something good, tell them.
Or if you see something they could be doing better.
Exactly. Companies pay attention to what their customers are saying, especially now with social media. It's so easy to make your voice heard.
So it's a two-way street. Companies need to be ethical, be transparent, and we as consumers need to be informed and engaged.
Absolutely. It's a partnership, and together we can create a marketplace that's better for everyone.
So we've covered a ton in this deep dive, from like this whole shift towards purpose-driven pricing to the psychology behind it all to the power of companies actually working together. But before we wrap up, what surprised you the most digging into all of this?
You know, it's funny, when you first said pricing for societal impact, I think I had this idea it'd be all about companies, like taking a hit financially to do the right thing. But it's so much more nuanced than that.
Right. That was a big aha for me, too. It's not about charity. It's about businesses realizing that doing good can actually be good for business. Long term, at least.
Exactly. It's not this either or profit or purpose. That Al-Azhar Park was a perfect example. They found a way to generate revenue that also made the park better for everyone.
Totally. Right. Because if those other parks that were free ended up run down and dangerous, nobody wins. Sometimes that fee, even if it seems weird at first, can actually lead to a better outcome for everybody.
It all comes back to true cost, right? What seems like a steal up front could end up costing us all more down the line. Environmental damage, inequality, even just a worse experience.
Yeah, it's like we need to redefine value beyond just like the number on the price tag, factor in those hidden costs, the long-term stuff.
And that's where I think we as consumers have a lot of power. The more aware we are, the more we demand better from companies, the more the market will have to respond.
We're voting with our wallets, basically.
100%. Every purchase is a chance to support businesses that align with our values, whether that's sustainability, ethical sourcing, whatever it is, and we can choose not to support the ones that don't.
So it's not just on the companies to change, it's on us too. We got to be more mindful about where our money's going and what impact it's having.
Absolutely. And honestly, talk about it. Tell your friends, family, whoever. The more we raise awareness, the more we demand those products and services that are better for everyone, the more companies will have to listen.
I love that. It's not just about being a conscious consumer. It's about being a conscious citizen.
Exactly. And those conscious consumers, they're the ones who are going to shape the future.
So well said. This deep dive has given me a lot to think about. Pricing, it's not just about numbers, it's about values. Making choices that reflect what matters to us and, hopefully, building a world that reflects those values too. Thanks for joining us.